Every nation has their patron saint, and this for England is St. George. In fact, George is also the saint to many other nations and cities, and he became one of the most venerated saints across the world, and has been celebrated particularly as a symbol of military power, and has been linked to the armies since the Crusades, with Christian armies riding into battle bearing the cross of St. George on their shields. But not many know who St. George actually was, and where the lore and story of his life has come from, but also many don't know how George succumbed to his death, as he was executed in the Diocletian persecutions of AD 303. Join us today as we look at the execution of St. George, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Little is actually known about the life of St. George, but it's believed he was in fact a Roman military officer who was of Greek descent, and that he died during the persecutions of those who were Christians. The veneration of him came in the centuries after, and the earliest texts that hold parts of his story are the works of the Bollandis and the Bibliotheca Hagiographica Gracia. George was one of a number of people mentioned in this, but Pope Gelasius claimed that George was a saint, whose names are justly reverenced amongst men, but whose actions are known only to God. The fact that St. George is most famously remembered for is the story of St. George and the dragon, and this tradition states that a fierce dragon was causing chaos and panic in the city of Cyrene in Libya, and then George arrived at the city. To stop the dragon from causing bloodshed towards the people of the city, the authorities gave 2 sheep each day to the dragon, but when they ran out of sheep, they were forced to sacrifice humans and the inhabitants of the city to appease the dragon. The humans to be sacrificed were selected by the city's people each day, and one time the daughter of the king was chosen to be sacrificed, and no one wanted to take her place. But it was said that George saved this girl by slaying the dragon armed with his lance, and because of this the king was immensely grateful and offered him a lot of treasure. But George refused to take the reward for saving the king's daughter, and he instead gave those treasures to the poor. The people who witnessed this in the city were so amazed that they all became Christians and were baptised, and then spread the word of St. George and Christianity. Of course, this is a legend, and there are many others that emerged around St. George. He was definitely a soldier, and it's believed he lived at the end of the 3rd century, and he was executed at the start of the 4th century. He came from a noble Christian home, and he rose throughout the ranks of the Roman army to become part of the soldiers that may have been protecting Emperor Diocletian. However, the emperor would order the final and bloodiest persecution of Christians of the Roman Empire, and many have believed that the dragon in the story may actually be symbolising Emperor Diocletian. The princess in the story may also represent the church and how it needed protecting from the emperor. St. George, being Christian, defied the Roman emperor, who he was meant to be defending and fighting for. He ordered all of the men of the army to offer a sacrifice to the Roman gods, and Diocletian rounded up communities of Christians. But George refused to go ahead with this command, and he tried to approach the emperor. But Diocletian was in no mood to negotiate, and he did not want to lose a talented soldier. However, George in front of the other soldiers denounced the order to slaughter Christians, and Diocletian attempted to convert him in his thinking. It's considered that he even offered gifts of money and land to George if he made a sacrifice to the Roman gods and spilled the blood of Christians, but George never accepted this, and Diocletian was incredibly offended. St. George was defying one of the most powerful men in the world, and he was willing to lose everything, including his life. Following this, Diocletian then had St. George arrested, and he was tortured in a number of ways. This includes allegedly being strapped to a spinning frame with swords on it, slashing his back and himself to pieces. But the emperor would then order George's execution, and he was paraded in front of a large crowd on the 23rd of April, 303 in Lydda. It's believed George's mother was from this town, and many images have been created over the years to show the execution of St. George. Some of these images show that there was a large crowd, and that he was wearing little clothes and was strapped to a wooden block, which was low and on the floor. He was told to kneel in these, before an executioner armed with an axe struck his head clean off, and with this George was made a saint. Some images show him kneeling down with his hands clasped praying to God, whilst an executioner from behind strikes his head off with a sharp sword, whilst many looked on. One similarity between many images of George is that he was tortured before his execution on a wheel, as mentioned earlier, and that his body was contorted in a way that may have been threaded through the spokes which were actually swords, or that he was placed on a breaking wheel style device, but on the edge were blades aimed to maim him. The aim of his torture was to get him to convert to Diocletian's way of thinking. Other images show him being forced to consume boiling liquids, or that he was even stuffed into a barrel, following his arms and legs being chopped off, and this barrel was filled with nails. One thing to remember when looking at saints is the legitimacy of their life and what they actually did in history. It's believed historically that George was a Christian soldier who was executed and was martyred as part of the Diocletian persecutions. Many of the horrors that later came, and the specifics regarding his torture may have been exaggerated, but George was executed for his faith. Because of this, in the Christian faith he became an important figure, whose symbols were carried into battle to defend the faith during the Crusades, and still today George is seen as a heroic figure. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.